On hosting today from Chicago.
I'm Frank Isola. But Chicago? Isn't that where Khalil Mack used to play? You know that player,
apparently
that town,
several
that team?
Bears used to play here. You know what, Frank? I know the new regime, the new GM, president, the new coach, they've been in town like a week. I'd like to keep Khalil Mack and run them out of town.
This is what happens when you bring in a new regime. They get rid of the old guys. Move on.
Welcome to PTI. Old man Kornheiser couldn't break the tape on a full week of work. So joining me today is our great friend, Mr. Frank Isola.
Mark Madness in the studio.
Break the tape. That's a good old guy phrase right there. Nobody knows about track and field anymore. Let's start with the Nets crushing the Sixers in Philly last night. Ben Simmons was the focus going into the game, but it was Kevin Durant who earned the spotlight on the court, putting up 25 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists in a 29-point win. By contrast, former Net and now Sixer James Harden, he made just 3 of 17 shots, including 0 for 10 from 3. Frank, how should this result change the perceptions of and predictions for the Eastern Conference?
Well, Mike, it's good. Now we can go a couple of days without having to hear how Harden and Embiid or Kobe and Shaq or Kareem and Magic until they actually accomplish something. You know, it's interesting. If you go back to last year, their 2 big home games, Game 5 against Atlanta, Game 7 against Atlanta, they lose both games. And we know they blame Ben Simmons for a lot of that. Ben Simmons was in the building. You can't blame him for last night. And if you're Joel Embiid, who's never been out of the second round, and James Harden, who left Kevin Durant, because you think that you could have a better chance of winning a title in Philadelphia. And all it tells you is that if number 7 on the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant, is healthy, good luck beating the Nets. And if Kyrie Irving is going to defend like that, that was the difference. Kyrie Irving at the start of the game, he demoralized James Harden. And the Nets took the crowd right out of it. If you thought it was going to take a half, Mike, it took 12 minutes. By the first quarter, this game was essentially over.
You know what, Frank? This is a classic for me. I don't want to overreact situation.
I overreact.
I'm sitting watching that game last night, and in a room of people, it was a hotel, sort of a sports bar, classy sports bar in Jacksonville, and the reaction was the same from like 100 people, which was just, oh my God.
Yep.
Oh my God. Oh, my God, again and again. And I mean, the turnovers, the Sixers, they played lazy. They played without any spirit. They didn't play with any force. Harden was, people now say, oh, yeah, I want a teammate who's got some dog in him. Well, there's an old-fashioned meaning of the word dog, too, when you go 0 for 10.
True.
And it looked like he did in
17.
Houston in half the games in May. Oh, Harden he's in late playoff form already with that performance last night. Okay, so now that I've overreacted, wow. Still, I don't know what the comeback is, except that I don't think, look, it was a crusade for Brooklyn last night. They crusaded for Ben Simmons. It worked. Do I think they can play with that sort of religious fervor every game of the playoffs, even if he's out there every game, Kyrie? No, I don't. Yeah. I don't think it's going to all come together like that. And I trust Philadelphia is going to play with a lot more in the way of guts and gumption than they showed last night.
All right, but guess what? Philadelphia is not going to be adding anybody. It's all right, Danny Green didn't play last night. The Nets are going to be adding a guy that rebounds, that defends, that could run the court now.
But also can't shoot,
I get
won't
that.
shoot.
And there's going to come a moment in the playoffs where he's going to have to step to the free throw line and knock down free throws, just like Giannis did last season. Yeah. I get that. But this is a Brooklyn Net team, Michael, that at this year lost 17 of 20 games. You tell me, you've been covering the NBA a long time. How many championship contenders have ever gone 3-17 and
None.
still have a chance to win a championship?
None.
But that's the Brooklyn Nets, because Kevin Durant, you look in the Eastern Conference, and Embiid could be the MVP. But there's 2 guys in the Eastern Conference that have done it on the biggest stage. One of them is Giannis, and the other one is Kevin Durant. And as long as he's healthy, and if this thing could be figured out somehow in Brooklyn with Eric Adams, the mayor, and they get Ben Simmons playing halfway, can he
That's a lot of ifs, Frank.
Can he be the Draymond Green of the Brooklyn Nets?
That's a lot of ifs. It's too many ifs for me. See, I don't think Brooklyn is the favorite, even though they still might be in Vegas, particularly after last night. Vegas, I'm sure, doubled down. Frank, I don't believe that. I don't believe you go 3-17 and walk off the street. And look, other teams, first of all, they got to be in a play-in. Almost certainly Brooklyn's going to be in a play-in.
Against Toronto, and Kyrie can't
and
go to
Toronto's not
Toronto.
changing. Canada's not changing some laws that are going to benefit Kyrie Irving, or rules. I shouldn't say laws. But there's a lot here. The overreaction is, oh, my God, Brooklyn, here they are. They're nuclear. This is the top end of what they can be. And if they can reproduce this multiple times in series, then they will beat everybody. So let me get that out the way by saying it. Do I think it's that easy? No, I don't.
But remember last year, Kevin Durant nearly carried them.
He did.
Past Milwaukee.
Because he's the best player in the game. He's the best player in the game. He is.
That's absolutely right. All right, let's move to the NFL and the big story in the city you're sitting in, Mike. The Chicago Bears, they traded Khalil Mack to the Los Angeles Chargers for a second-round draft pick this year and a sixth next year. Mike, your thoughts on where this trade puts the Chargers and where it leaves the Bears?
Well, I mean, you put Khalil Mack out there with anybody named Bosa.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you can terrorize offenses, and particularly in that conference, and now particularly in that division. So that's fine. I don't care about the Chargers. The Bears, I'm trying, speaking of not overreacting, Frank, I'm trying not to go crazy on, again, a new regime. But I will tell you, here's what I hate about all these new coaches. When I say all of them, I mean all of them. All of them whose names aren't like Belichick and Peyton. They come in now completely unproven, and they want their system, their scheme to dictate everybody on the field. So let's get rid of maybe a future Hall of Famer, because my scheme is this. They haven't won a game. They haven't won a game. And this is what I hate now about pro football, the NFL, and this is why I think the coaching is worse than it ever is. And just compare the coaching roster.
They did it for cap
from
space.
40 years ago.
They're doing it for cap space.
I don't care about the cap space.
Mike,
You're an NFL team.
He didn't win. They didn't win one playoff game with him. You're making it sound like they're getting rid of Mike Singletary.
Okay, no, you're telling me about my team now that a guy goes double doink on a 40-yarder and you want to blame Khalil Mack? That ain't
you
playing
blame
here.
Mitch Trubisky, though, for that.
I don't even blame Mitch Trubisky. And subsequent to that, I blame the head coach because the head coach was inadequate. I don't like what I've seen from this head coach or this GM. But it's early. I am not going to go sports talk radio quite yet. The Chargers, I'm sure I'll let you take it away. You get rid of Khalil Mack. You gave up 2 firsts to get him, and you get a second and a sixth in return? Huh? But I ain't an accountant, but I know that ain't good.
But, Mike, you know what? His production had gone down steadily. His best year, guess who was the linebacker coach? Brandon Staley, the head coach of the Chargers.
Brandon Staley thinks he can play.
Well, yeah, and guess what? They need him because here's the thing about the Chargers. They have what everyone in the NFL wants. They already know who their franchise quarterback is. So once you solve that, it's about building the defense. And Russell Wilson just came into the division. And you have Patrick Mahomes. They were 30th against the rush last year in the NFL. They need to get better defensively. You put Bosa and Mack together. Do you know over the last 5 years, Mack had 46.5 sacks, Bosa 47.5. That's what you need to win in that division. You need defense. You got to get after Mahomes.
And the Bears don't need to stop Aaron Rodgers. The Bears don't need defense.
They got to get a quarterback first. They got to get a quarterback.
They got a quarterback.
You don't know that.
They traded up to get him last year.
You don't know that.
What? They better know it, or all of them better get out of town. All of them. I'll drive them. Now, to college basketball. You got me all fired up and crazy on a day where I'm supposed to be calm going into March Madness, the big weekend, champ weekend. 2 of the top 4 teams have gone down in the last 24 hours. Last night, it was number 3 Baylor getting knocked off by Oklahoma. And this afternoon, number 4 Auburn was eliminated from the SEC tournament by Texas A&M. Frank, with Baylor and Auburn losing, who do you expect to be Sunday's top 4 seeds?
Well, I think the easy one, obviously, is Gonzaga. And they have the player in Chet Holmgren. That, to me, is the most fascinating guy that's going to be in the NCAA tournament. Very good chance he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. So those of us that really follow the NBA and follow college basketball this time of year, that's the guy you want to watch. Arizona, I think, is a lock as well. Those are the 2 locks. I think the other 2 seeds are coming from either the Big 12 or the SEC, or I should say 1 from each conference. Baylor losing means that Kansas has a chance. Kansas wins the tournament, it'll be them. If not, I'm putting Baylor in, plus they won the national championship last year. And then in the SEC, you have Auburn, which just lost, still has a chance if Kentucky doesn't run the table and win the SEC. So I think it's going to be, it's going to be Gonzaga, Arizona, Big 12, SEC. Sorry, ACC and Big East.
Let me throw a monkey wrench into that. and I'm still distracted by you telling me that we don't need to play defense against Aaron Rodgers. No, they need to play defense in Denver, but the Bears don't need to stop a guy who says, I own you.
Quarterbacks in that division aren't that good, except for one.
So, Arizona could lose to Colorado, shouldn't, but with the upsets we've been seeing, Frank, Kansas got to play TCU. They split with TCU. Split means they've lost a game with TCU in the last 10 days. Kentucky, none of us think that Kentucky will lose to Vandy. I'm cheering for Scottie Pippen's son probably in that one. Playing for Vandy, get the upset. I mean, can you go as far down as like a 10 or 11 or a 12 ranked team and a team like Wisconsin? Only if there's a slew of upsets. But, Frank, all we've been seeing is upsets, so why should we go into Friday, Friday evening? There needs to be like a nickname for this Friday, Freaky Friday in the NCAA on the bubble. Why do we go in thinking there's not going to be a slew of upsets and destroy these teams, check, that you said? Even Duke. I mean, I got Duke and Gonzaga as my must-have, my locks. Gonzaga's the only lock, Frank. Yeah. I mean, Duke is really good, but I don't know that they're going to be necessarily a top seed.
You know, when Auburn walked off the court today, they lost to Texas A&M. I'm not saying they weren't trying, but they certainly weren't walking off the court like, oh, God, our season is finished. They know they're either a number one or a number two. They know ultimately, Bruce Pearl and those players know ultimately they're going to be judged on how they do in the tournament, not in the SEC tournament.
Yep, that tournament, the big one.
That's right.
Let's take a break. Coming up, the Warriors beat the Red Hot Nuggets. What's the word for that?
And more on Khalil Mack. I'm just kidding. And Ben Simmons wasn't the only one who faced a tough crowd last night. We'll talk about Jack Eichel's return to Buffalo.
Full-scale rebuild without a player who symbolizes the Chicago Bears franchise.
You cut your losses.
The linebacker, the big, tough. Time to fill in the blank with Frank. And what's the word? What's first?
The Warriors' win over the Nuggets was blank.
The Warriors' win last night, in which they came back, came from behind and had a 13-0 run in the fourth quarter, keyed, of course, by Steph Curry. It was opportunistic, Frank, because as hot as Denver had been, you could tell going into the fourth quarter they were running out of gas. They played 4 games in 5 nights, which used to be a staple in the NBA. Yep. Less so now as they've tweaked the scheduling to get rid of those games, which are really just sort of scheduled losses. And, I mean, the Nuggets have been really red hot, even though they still are missing 2 of their top, 4 players?
Yep.
And Joker is just great, almost had another triple-double. But that was opportunistic. The Warriors knew what they were doing. They knew defensively what they had to do. They had to dog Denver, get them into that fourth quarter, and make it so fatigue became a factor, if not the primary one. So opportunistic win for the Dubs last night.
They played Monday in Denver. That was a makeup game that they were supposed to play in late December. I'm going to say it's overdue. Think about this, Michael. On January 1st, the Warriors went into Salt Lake City, beat the Jazz. Since that day, they had only won 1 road game against a team with a winning record, and that was your Chicago Bulls on January 14th. 2 things about the Warriors. Number 1, our guy Andrew Wiggins, who made the All-Star team, ever since making that team hasn't done much. And now you're starting to understand, not you, but people in general understanding what Draymond Green means to this team. His stature has grown that he's been away. He initiates the offense. He's terrific on defense. They have slumped a lot without Draymond, who's due back against March 14th.
It's also, and nobody wants to deal with this, it also has to do with the great Klay Thompson coming back into that lineup, taking the shots. Wiggins and Poole have not been what they were before he got back. And you have to put him in there, but there's a dilemma. There's a price. There's a cost to everything. Right. Those guys aren't doing the same things that they were able to do or asked to do before Klay Thompson came back, and the Warriors have got to figure that out. And that's why it's not as simple as putting Draymond back or putting Klay back or even putting KD back. Last night's results aside. What's next?
Jack Eichel's response to the Buffalo crowd was blank.
It was unnecessary, I thought, Frank. I mean, first of all, Eichel, he was so annoyed after the game. They announced him in a way that kind of surprised me. They just singled him out and announced him they had a tribute. He acknowledged the tribute, and he acknowledged some fans cheering. Some fans were booing. I listened to it. I thought it was at 50-50 or maybe more like 60-40 cheers. But he was so annoyed. He said, it took him 7 years to get loud up in here. And he just seemed annoyed and churlish. And it was unnecessary. don't address it. If it's mixed, just say, hey, I appreciate the time I was here and the people who cheered for me, and let it go. Instead, he was sort of like, eh.
Yeah. I'm going to give him 2 minutes for pettiness, so I'm going to go with petty on this one. Here's a guy who was the second overall pick in 2015, played 375 games for the team, and guess what? The fans there liked him. They never made the playoffs. Do you know that they haven't made the playoffs since 2011?
So long.
The Buffalo Sabres. And that's a great sports town. And by the way, they're still licking their wounds from not beating the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo fans. And now you have Jack Eichel coming in. All right, he got some boos, which you would expect. Why go after the fans? It was you and the organization that were fighting over how to deal with your herniated disc.
Yeah.
The fans had nothing to do with it. Why pick on the poor fans of Buffalo? Haven't they suffered enough? Yet, they lose to the Chiefs, the Buffalo fans, and now you have a hockey team that hasn't been in the playoffs since 2011 and hasn't won a playoff series in about 15 years. It's crazy.
It's unthinkable that team has just sort of been wallowing on the floor, on the ice, if you will. That's the final word. Let's take one last break, but still to come. The Big Ten's top seed goes out.
And does it make sense that Georgia said, see ya, to Tom Crean? He's out at Georgia.
Yeah, it made a lot more sense than saying see ya to Khalil Mack. Made a lot more sense than that.
Oh, he's going to be great on the Chargers. Can't wait.
I